First of all, ladies and gentlemen, let us wish a warm welcome back to our beloved Dennis Oleski, who, in the alternate timeline, is kind of a dick. But we'll get to him in a moment, for we have far more pressing issues in this episode to get to, so let's begin. We start by hovering over the wreckage of a downed helicopter, accompanied by Matthew Deaver's voiceover, who exclaims Castle Rock is being punished for its sins, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah being sinful cities in the Bible that were ravaged by God through fire and brimstone, just like how Castle Rock was engulfed in flames in episode 5. We bear witness to some gruesome events from Castle Rock's past, including a school bus getting destroyed by a train and a funeral passing over Pangbourne Bridge with kids wearing the same type of masks like the townspeople wore during the fire in episode 5. Matthew's voiceover recounts the story of his mother trying to kill him as a baby with a wooden coat hanger, convinced that the devil has a hold of him. But God brought him back, so Matthew decided to dedicate every day of his life to him. Remember what Ruth says, nothing stays dead in this town. Matthew then spouts the same narration that Dale Lacey said in episode 2, that God doesn't take requests, and that he waited years for instructions. Like Lacey, he assembled a cage, and you can note the axe and light bulb we've seen in Henry's flashbacks from previous episodes. After the title credits, we're transported to Boston, where we find the kid going for a run. We'll later find out this is an alternate timeline, but we'll get to that in a bit. He's getting ready for a big presentation, and we see him eating something other than Wonder Bread for the first time, implying that we are indeed not in the time or universe we've been watching for the majority of the series. He picks up a note reading, "Break a brain today, love M." M likely referring to his wife/girlfriend Marin, who we'll meet later. The kid lectures on the idea of continuity, and how when continuity is disrupted can lead to dementia. He tells the people that he's discovered a cure for Alzheimer's by use of an implant which has helped a cat named Puck, the same name as Ruth's dog. Apparently this chip can unscramble the brain to make people remember. If you recall in episode 5, Alan says, "Why don't you just put a chip in her, like a golden retriever?" This also makes the events at the end of that episode more powerful. When the kid tells Alan he can fix Ruth, he means he can literally fix her by putting a chip in her. Walking with Marin, the kid gets a call from, surprise surprise, Alan Pangbourne. In this timeline, Alan is alive and well. The same can't be said for the kid's father, who Alan tells him has just passed away. The kid arrives, crossing over the Pangbourne Bridge, where we see a markedly different Castle Rock. People are out celebrating the Fall Harvest Festival as the kid passes the Castle Rock Call newspaper and the Emporium Galorium run by Reginald Merrill, mentioned in King's Needful Things. We even get to see the improved Mellow Tiger gastropub and vibrant downtown, which now boasts a sushi and ramen shop. Outside the town square are two more King references. Sheldon Stationery, referring to Paul Sheldon from Stephen King's Misery, and Claiborne Creamery, referring to Dolores Claiborne. Coincidentally, both film adaptations feature Kathy Bates. The kid stops for a moment outside the church. Notice the sign of the Duchamp-Merrill marriage, both characters from King's The Body. He heads outside the Deaver home with his bag, just like Henry did in episode 1, using the key located under the frog that young Molly used in episode 3. The house looks in complete disrepair, with private property signs and an unkept lawn out front. And inside is no better, looking like an episode of Hoarders. Random knickknacks, newspapers, and religious paraphernalia are strewn about the home. The kid experiences a flashback of his father preaching a line from Corinthians, "Death is swallowed up in victory," Corinthians having come up in almost every episode to date. In Henry's old room, the kid looks across the street at Molly's house and experiences a flashback of Molly's flashlight, something only Henry has taken part in so far, hinting another link between Henry and the kid. He meets Bridget, who you may recall as Molly's sister from episode 2. She thinks he's a real estate agent who's scammed the obituaries to get a jump on Castle Rock's bustling real estate market, a big contrast to the rundown Castle Rock we've seen in the other timeline. Bridget tells him that the guy who owned the house blew his head off by the lake, just like Dale Lacey, but he had a different method. Molly appears and remembers the kid, calling him by his real name, Henry Deaver. Yes, we finally get to know that the kid is Matthew and Ruth's son in an alternate timeline. Now, for the purposes of the remaining videos, I'm still going to call the kid and not Henry, so that all our heads don't pull a Matthew Deaver and explode from confusion. If you remember back to episode 6, that Henry told his son Wendell that Ruth and Matthew's biological son died during childbirth, but in this timeline he's alive and well. The kid and Molly go to the Mellow Tiger Gastropub, where everyone in town seems to know Molly. They all say hi to her, unlike the other timeline where she's thought of as a crazy person. The kid even jokes that she's like the mayor, but she tells us she's just a council chair. Her sister Bridget is the one screwed up in this timeline, which is a fun reversal. The kid gives us some interesting information, that his mother Ruth lives in Sarasota with Alan. Alan convinced Ruth to leave Matthew in this timeline, and she left him and moved with the kid. The kid even refers to their love as star-crossed, a reference to Romeo and Juliet, who both, spoiler alert, die in the end.
To engrossing death.
Marin calls as the kid enters the Deaver home and the lights go out. He inquires if she's taken the pregnancy test yet as he investigates the fuse box. We see the kid's shoe, which was one of the flashes Henry experienced in episode 4. Then another huge moment. The kid finds young Henry in the cage. Zaleski is back, and it looks like he's in charge of investigating this case. He asks when the last time the kid talked to his father, which was when he was about young Henry's age. Apparently young Henry is saying his name is Henry Deaver, just like when the kid called himself that in episode 1. Zaleski asks straight up if his father touched him, trying to draw a connection with a priest having a little boy locked in his basement. We learn that in both timelines Matthew heard the voices in the woods, and that he brought his kid out there in the hopes that he would hear it. Young Henry, hearing the sound of the schisma, makes a break for the woods, but is quickly caught. Whatever is in the woods is beckoning him back. The kid listens to a tape of Matthew going over all the bad things that have happened in Castle Rock. The tape says week 1437, which, if you do the math, is roughly 27 years since he started, the amount of years the kid was apparently locked up. In the shed he finds hundreds of tapes, one in particular asking if the bad patch of events started with the French settlers hundreds of years ago, and the story of a young girl forced to carve up her family and eat them to stay alive during the freezing cold. In the woods, the kid uncovers what appears to be the anechoic chamber his father tried to build, the one Odin told Henry about in episode 6. Apparently Matthew found young Henry in the woods. He had blacked out after hearing the schisma so loud he reappeared in this new timeline, a new timeline where no one knew who he was. Matthew, believing young Henry to be the devil, drugs him and locks him in the cage, even calling him the Deceiver, which sounds really close to Deaver. The kid shows Molly the tapes, and the two of them try to piece the puzzle together. According to Matthew, young Henry was down there for 27 years and didn't age a day, just like the kid. Matthew taught him how to carve soap figurines like the ones we've seen in previous episodes. Then he recites lines eerily similar to what Dale Lacey wrote to Alan Pangborn, stating, "As long as the devil walks the streets of Castle Rock, tragedy after tragedy will pile up." Molly says she can find out where they took him using her superpowers as Castle Rock council chair. Notice how she's wearing the same jacket from episode 8 where she appears bloody in the forest. An entourage of ambulance and fire trucks rush past them, foreshadowing the fire that we see has overtaken the hospital where young Henry was staying at, killing 7 in the process. To make matters worse, the cops think Henry did it. In fact, he's even confessed to it. Molly is able to question Henry and asks him why he started the fire, to which he explains, "The boy in the bed next to him got too close. Who or what this boy is remains to be seen, but it could have something to do with the link to the other timeline." Remember, the fire at Juniper Hill started when the inmates apparently lit their own mattresses on fire. It's possible he was seeing something from a different timeline. The schisma gets louder and Henry goes frantic, saying they have to get to the woods. Molly touches him and experiences flashes of the alternate timeline. Molly, likely because she's the coolest chair counsel in the land, is able to take the suspected arsonist home, as long as Officer Zaleski follows and keeps an eye on them. Molly experiences more flashbacks, this time her killing Matthew in the other timeline. She exclaims that she has to take young Henry to the woods, and boots the car at a train crossing, leaving Zaleski behind. Henry makes a run for the woods, and we see the images of him running from previous episodes are not of him being chased by his father, but by the kid and Molly. Henry stops in a small clearing where he's transported into what is likely a Thinny from the Dark Tower series. My apologies if it's actually pronounced Tinny, I'm not exactly sure, so bear with me. The forest acts as one, a weak spot where the fabric of the world has been worn thin and reality has eroded away. Thinnies have the appearance of a silver-green fog and emit a highly unpleasant sound, yet will lure nearby people in. This space acts as a rift between the two timelines and perhaps countless others. Here, Henry witnesses a woman in period clothing holding a bloody knife. This is likely the French settler who carved her family up and ate them that Matthew talked about. When Molly touches Henry, she is also transported to this plane. And to make matters worse, Zaleski shows up with his gun drawn. What is with him in drawing his gun all the time? Back with Molly, we see more Ravens, who haven't had a good time so far on Castle Rock. Henry chases after the woman and Molly follows, but is soon shot by what appears to be Dennis. He does have a history of shooting people, but how she got shot is still a mystery. Zaleski clearly shot in the air, and nowhere near her. One theory is that the bending of space and time in this particular area warped the bullet so that when Zaleski fired, it somehow shot her. Another theory is that she was actually shot by the prison guards chasing after the escapees seen here. Molly pleads to the kid to help Henry, and when he touches her, he is also somehow transported to the Thinny. Whatever this place is, it's not a good one. We see a woman cutting her arms. Note the piece of jewelry on her finger and blood similar to what Henry saw in the anechoic chamber. Some claim this woman is the French woman in a different timeline, but I'm not convinced. Here they are side by side for those who would like to compare. Everything crescendos, and the kid suddenly wakes up in winter. He travels to the bluffs atop Castle Lake, the same place where Lacey drove his car off in episode 1 to witness Alan Pangborn rescuing Henry in 1991. The kid has somehow managed to travel from his timeline through the rift and out the other end in Henry's timeline, the one we've been watching since episode 1. He tells Molly that he wandered around for days but couldn't get back until Lacey found him and took him to Shawshank. That Lacey, quote, heard the call and that the kid was the devil. Episode 9 ends the same way 8 did, with the kid saying, "You believe me, don't you? But do we? Is the kid in this timeline a reliable narrator? Is he telling us the truth? Or is it all a lie?" What we do know is that bad stuff has happened as a result of these timelines being messed up, and whoever switches doesn't seem to age. My prediction for next episode is that the kid will likely get back to his own timeline. 11 days will have passed, just like the 11 days when young Henry was discovered. And that he'll find out his wife is pregnant, and maybe even call him Alan Deaver. But this will likely mean that he'll also have forgotten the complete 27 years he was locked up, just like young Henry when he reappeared. And don't count out that chip coming into play. I hope you'll tune in next week for my final Castle Rock episode, and let me know which show to do next in the comments below. As always, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. See you all next week.